I know why my husband ended himself. It was in 2018. He'd been struggling with depression, and we had a 16-month-old baby. He had a very toxic, covertly incest relationship with his mother, and an abusive one with his father. Both parents shared drugs with him as a young teen going into college, and contributed heavily to his addictions. We moved halfway across the country to get away from them both, and everything was going really well, but suddenly his mom showed up on our doorstep one day. She'd sold her house, that she'd had for almost 40 years, had taken early retirement, and moved into an apartment down the street. She said she missed him. She told me he'd never make it without her. The next month, everything changed. Fell apart. I had no idea that was all the time we had left. His drinking got insane. He'd always been a bit of a lush because he had a lot of physical pain, scoliosis, but he got fired for drinking on the job. I know now he also relapsed and was trying to hide it. A week before he died, we got in a fight about money, about me not giving him any because I knew he was wasting it, and he came home intoxicated and backhanded me while I was holding our daughter. I had never seen him like this. I remember screaming and running to the nursery, and he busted the door open and hit me again. Both times I fell to the floor. He'd never touched me in anger before. I remember I put our baby in the crib and stood up to fight, but he left again. When we saw each other the next day, I had a black eye. I was also set to sign a contract on my new store after months of training, a managing partner at a restaurant. I got creative with the makeup, creative with the backstory, and pretended I opened a door the wrong way and slammed into it with a coworker present as a witness. Ha 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 ha. So funny. He didn't speak to me for most of the week, not out of anger, but of shame. I asked what we were going to do about it. Were we going to talk about it? He said no, because he knew I'd forgive him, but he couldn't forgive himself. 5 days passed. He insisted I get a new, used car because our old Camry was constantly needing to be fixed, and bought me an Escort off Craigslist. He was supposed to work his new job that upcoming Sunday, but it was right before Halloween, and he said instead, we were going to a pumpkin patch and dressed our daughter up. We spent an exorbitant amount for us. Our regular work schedule was him working days and me nights and switching off daycare PIU and spending time with our daughter. That Monday he fell apart again and began calling my cell and work numbers repeatedly, telling me he couldn't watch her, that he was angry, irritable, and felt out of control of himself. He said he thought he might hurt her, that she wasn't safe. He said he needed some time off. I was in the middle of a review while managing a store of 20 people when he dropped her off, and I had to beg daycare to take her. I was also the only income we had at the time. He came home briefly that night, yelled a lot, put 2 holes in the wall and ripped the banister off the wall and left. I had no money to give him, so he left. I had never seen him like this. Usually I stayed up late, but I was exhausted, and our daughter needed me. In the morning, I saw him asleep on the couch. I remember thinking we were probably going back to rehab, and I needed to figure out how to keep his mom away. I didn't kiss him because I knew it would wake him. When I got home that night, I was rushing. He hadn't responded to my texts, and we needed to pay the electric bill and grab our daughter from daycare and talk. He was in bed. When I touched him, cold. I tried CPR, but he was gone. He left me a box of journals filled with love letters and so much pain, detailing how he couldn't get away from his mom, and she was making him choose one of us, but it doesn't matter because he's turning into his dad. He'd already hit me and knew he'd inevitably hit our child too. His mom had been enabling him and paying for the drugs because he was in pain since he was 12, and he said he couldn't do it anymore. He had to be free. He purposely overdosed with a bottle of his antidepressants and a gram of cocaine that I know his mom bought. She was also the last person he spoke to before he died. After he died, she tried to impersonate me and take his body, and she pressured the funeral home for a death certificate, which I've refused to give her. She also told the police we were in the middle of a divorce and insisted she was next of kin. She then made a scene at the funeral and threw herself, sobbing, on his casket and had to be carried out. The funeral home director actually pulled me aside, apologized, and suggested the reason she was so desperate for a certificate was because she had a life insurance policy on him, which is what the coroner also suggested when I called to see if the autopsy was done, and he gently said I didn't need to call every day. But I wasn't. After he died, she immediately packed her bags and moved back halfway across the country after she reported me to cops for not letting her see her grandbaby. When I finally got the autopsy results, I let her know. Ended his own life. She said, "Well, that's that then," and hung up. She spent the last 4 years arguing the Kiod and trying to rally his family to convince me as well that it was just an overdose because then she can collect on the policy. The job she retired from? A drug abuse family crisis counselor. I'm never letting that happen. Who is that one stranger that you never forgot? When I was 15 years old, I ran away from home because I was pissed off at my parents for a reason I can't remember. I didn't have much money, so I decided to hop onto the SkyTrain, public transport train in British Columbia, and ride it as far as it would go. I reached the end of the line in less than an hour, and decided I wanted to ride it all the way back again, while trying to formulate some kind of plan of how I wanted to live the rest of my life without my parents or anyone. At the last stop, or the first stop, depending on your perspective of it, a girl came on and sat in the row right behind me. I didn't pay much attention to her at first, as I was busy writing my life plan on a napkin. It was a few minutes later that she got up and sat next to me, curious as to what I was writing. I told her the story, and after a few laughs, we began talking about everything and anything. Her name was Amanda, 17 years old, and absolutely wonderful. She told me she was getting off at the last stop, which was also the first stop, depending on how you look at it. It was also the stop I had gotten on originally, and I told her we would ride to it together. The train ride took less than an hour, and what a wonderful hour indeed. When the last stop did come, we both knew we probably wouldn't see each other ever again. This was before the days of cell phones, and I was a shy little kid afraid to make moves. As we got to the end of the sidewalk, which split in two different directions, she went right, and I went left. Before saying goodbye, she turned to me and asked me a question that has become a wonderful part of my life. She asked me, "Tell me something you have done, or want to do, that you think I should do. It can be anything, as challenging as you want it to be, or as easy. As long as you give me the rest of my life to complete it, I promise I will do it." I was confused as to why, but I thought about it, and told her, "Sing an a cappella song in a room full of strangers." She said perfect, and asked me if I would like a challenge as well. I told her I did, and she told me, "Read from start to finish, Ulysses, by James Joyce." I had never heard of it at the time, but I agreed, and we said our goodbyes. I have an awful memory and can't remember most conversations I have with most people, but I remember all of that clearly. You know why? Because of the challenge she gave me. In the 12 years that have passed since, I have tried to read that book in over 150 different sittings. Every time I open my copy of the 780-page monster of a book, I always think of her, and I always think of that day. I've never been sure if it was her intent or not, but she left her lasting memory on me with that challenge. I soon after learned what she did was a completely wonderful and amazing thing for me. So I decided to keep it going. I've met a lot of strangers in my life, some that have become friends, and some, due to living in different time zones and whatnot, didn't. I don't want to just have experiences and then let them go. I want to remember these meetings and embrace the fact that they happened. So whenever I leave someone who has left an amazing impact on my life, I always make sure to add them to my Ulysses bucket list. I ask them to give me a challenge, as difficult or as easy as they want it to be, and regardless of the fact that they have done it or not. Simply something their heart has wanted to do. Some have been easy and fun. I met a man in India 9 years ago who told me to, for a week or a month, cook and buy twice as much food as I intend on eating and give the other half to a stranger in need. I completed that mission 8 years ago and thought about that man and the time we had all the way through. I met a girl on a cruise 6 years ago who told me to jump into a body of water on a slightly cold day without touching or feeling the temperature of the water first. I did that the very same year. I met a couple at an outdoor music festival a few years ago that told me to wear the most bizarre outfit imaginable and walk through a public place, completely oblivious to the fact that you aren't looking normal. I did that task the very next day at the same festival. Some have been difficult, to say the least. 3 guys I met in Amsterdam and smoked all night with told me to go to a mall and give 10 strangers 10 presents. That one took a lot of courage, but I did it a year or so after I met them. It was nerve-wracking, but at the same time exhilarating leaving my comfort zone. A girl I met on a plane told me to skydive. I'm still in the process of getting that done. A couple I met in Cali on the beach told me to tell the 5 people I hated the most, that I love them and respect them. That one was very difficult because of my stubbornness, but I've come close to completing that list many times. Still in the process, 2 more people to go. And some things have had an everlasting impact on my daily life. I met a girl at a music festival who told me that whenever I get mad at someone, walk away, sing my happy song in my head for 5 minutes, go back to the person I'm mad at with a calm heart and mind, and work things out. I've made this my way of life. I once met a man at a gym in a hotel I was staying at that told me, whenever your body and brain tells you that you are exhausted and done, use your heart instead and push out 2 more reps. I've made this my motto when working out or working on any kind of extenuating exercise in which my body demands me to quit. I also use it while working on anything and while studying. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever received. There are many others that each brought joy to my life. There are still many tasks I have yet to accomplish, and every time I think of these tasks, I think of the people that gave them to me. It amazes me how well I remember all these people, while I can't remember so many aspects of even yesterday. These experiences, not only do I take from them a mission or a challenge, I also take from them a memory of them that never fails to appear inside of my mind. I opened my Ulysses book for probably the 300th time yesterday and read a few pages, which prompted me to share this story with you today. I'm in the final 30 pages of the book, also known as the most dreaded of the read. In the last 40 pages or so, James Joyce doesn't use a single punctuation mark, no periods, no commas, no nothing, a straight 50-page run-on sentence. I never saw Amanda after that day, nor do I know if she ever did get a chance to sing a song to a room full of strangers. But what I do know is that she gave me a gift that has never once stopped giving. So wherever you may be, thank you for giving me the Ulysses bucket list, and I swear I'll finish it one day. My life advice? Simple. Create your own Ulysses bucket list.